So, ladies and gentlemen, Joel Sadler.
Thank you. All right, let's do it. Let's hit it. So, as that list demonstrates, nobody actually knows what I do, which I try and keep that way. So all I'm going to do is tell you the story of how I came to believe that nothing is cooler than having fun. And if I get a little preachy at times, I promise it's because I'm preaching more at myself and reminding myself than I am anybody else. And I've learned one thing from good talks: always start with a baby photo. And I use this to illustrate the fact that we're not born self-conscious. When you are a kid, it's why pictures of people as kids are a lot funnier than pictures of those same people as adults. And so nobody tells you that you can't ride on a unicorn in a cardigan pantless, and no one tells you you can't dress up as a Spider-Man and the Lone Ranger at the same time. And my mom actually surprised me being here tonight, and it's appropriate because I have to give her credit for cultivating in this. They would read this book to me more than any other book, more than the Bible, more than the Chronicles of Narnia, more than Mice and Men. The Big Orange Spot by Daniel Pinkwater had the biggest influence on my life. And so in this book, Mr. Plumbean lives on a street where all the houses look the same. And then one night, a bird drops a can of orange paint on his roof. And he doesn't wipe it off, much to the chagrin of his neighbors. Instead, he paints his entire house rainbow-colored with wild animals. And I'm not going to give it away. Consider it required reading, but individuality does win out in the end. And it's that kind of thinking that found me dressed up like a flying pig, running around on a service trip to Mexico saying, hi, hee, estoy divertido, which literally translates to, I'm fun. And then later, when I was teaching English in China, I would sing Matchbox 20 songs on a broom guitar to entertain a classroom full of middle schoolers, because really, when you're in a room with 60 kids that don't speak English, cool goes out the window, and you just do whatever you can to keep them from setting fires, and that's a true story. But sadly, eventually, we all learn self-consciousness. We all learn what's hot and what's not, what's cool, what's not cool. Sometimes it's middle school, sometimes it's high school. For me, honestly, it was in my 20s when I first kind of erected, as I like to kind of think of it, this prison of the self-image that I had, just knowing, this is not me, this is stock photography that I found. I literally Googled hipster, and I took the first thing that came back. And for me, it's never worse than when I'm traveling. Something about traveling just heightens my need to be cool, to not look like a tourist. Again, stock photography. And it all came to a head several years ago. I was on a trip. I was in New York, not to brag, but I was sitting in this like incredibly cool cafe in the East Village. Again, not to brag. And I look up and I see this family, and I think to myself, dear Lord, they are awful. They are awful. I mean, Dorkville called, and it wants its cargo shorts back. I'm good with the insults. It wasn't this family, this is a reenactment. But I noticed one big thing that was different about them from me, and it was they were laughing and having a good time. And I was just sitting there caught up in my own attempted coolness. And I realized fun trumps cool every single time. Nothing is cooler than having fun. Thank you. And it was a very freeing moment for me, and it's never left me. And I have to just kind of, this is phase 2 of 3 for my talk, mention that social media did not invent coolness, but it did weaponize it. It quantified it for us. We now have metrics, likes, comments, followers. They all have this incredible power over how we see ourselves. And we're living in what I have referred to now, because I'm very clever, called the image industrial complex. Thank you. Yeah, you heard, note it. And constantly just, was your trip this good? Does your house look like this? And hashtags like inspo and Motivation Monday and squad goals, which I now know what that means. And I have to say, we have a doubly bad in Charleston. Not only do we have literal boatloads of the worst tourists, but Charleston is really small. People say Charleston's not a city, it's a town, and I say Charleston's not a town, it's really more of a high school. Glad some people get the reference. Just let that sit for a second. And it can be really hard not to feel inferior in this environment. I mean, you have super cool places like Kitchen Basic or whatever it's called that have just opened up, you know? And how do you keep up? And so I've got some exercises that I want to do with you. This is phase 3, so I'm going to run through this one real quick. Phase 1 is something I call I like that. And so what you do, instead of standing somewhere looking at your phone, look up and look at the people around you and just pick things out that you like about them. I'm getting there in a second. And just think to yourself, oh, I like this, I like their hair, or I like their walk, or I bet he's a good listener. Second, dance, especially at weddings. Weddings are the hardest place to dance. Am I right? People just stand on the side and they point and they laugh like they're a good dancer, and they're not. And the last thing I want you to do, and I want you to all do this with me, is I want you to just practice saying the motto, okay? So say this with me. Nothing is cooler than having fun, all right? Nothing is cooler than having fun. All right, now we're going to whisper it. Nothing is cooler than having fun. And then for Ben, British accent, nothing is cooler than having fun, mate. That's England, right? England? England? Great. And now let's yell it. Nothing is cooler than having fun. Now, don't forget it. Thank you.
So good. One more time, Joel Sadler.